I now have the great pleasure of introducing LEAP, the Law Enforcement Accountability Project launched by Ava DuVernay nearly a year ago. LEAP is a fund dedicated to empowering activists who use their art to change the dialogue around and reveal the deadly realities of police aggression and brutality. LEAP elevates these activists through funding short-term projects in film, theater, photography, fine art, music, poetry, literature, sculpture, and dance. This year, I've thought about and seen how art informs radical change. Art is organic and can come from any individual in a completely unique way. It's not contained, it's not programmatic, it's not predictable. This mimics abolition. Abolition is discovery. It is complete liberation and gives us something to seek and create. When we, the people, can topple the system with art, we aren't left with debris. We are left with endless potential. So without further ado, LEAP.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mercedes Cooper. I am the Vice President of Public Programming at Array. I bring you greetings from our founder, Ava DuVernay, our President, Tulane Jones, and the whole Array family. You could be doing anything on this Sunday evening, but you're here watching this, so I thank you for joining us today. If you aren't familiar, Array is a multi-platform arts and social impact collective dedicated to narrative change. Last year, following the recorded murder of George Floyd by Derek Chauvin, Array initiated LEAP, the Law Enforcement Accountability Project, in an effort to lift the veil so that police officers who have abused their power can no longer hide within a system that often protects them. Through LEAP, we are elevating activist storytelling by commissioning artists across many disciplines over the next 2 years to create work that amplifies a specific case where a Black person has been murdered by police and where that police officer or officers have not been held accountable. We're so proud to be invited to close out this year's Police Violence Symposium by showcasing work from our inaugural LEAP artist grantees. You'll meet these extraordinary creatives and hear a bit about their approach to creating art that magnifies the social injustices embedded in our systems. I hope that you will take time following this session to visit leapaction.org to experience each project more in depth. And I invite you to stand with us. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Leap Action and help amplify these artists and the projects as they debut. Together, we can demand accountability that is desperately needed to ignite change.
Good evening, all. My name is Anthony Fosu, a member of the class of 2024 intending to major in government, and I will be your student moderator for tonight. I'm humbled and grateful to MC tonight's Artivism Artist Cypher on police violence, global and local perspectives as part of the Police Violence Symposium. The stories we tell and will hear tonight are important. Perspective is indispensable, and the truth we tell is invaluable. Tonight's showcase introduces the first grantees of LEAP, the Law Enforcement Accountability Project. We will be viewing each of the artists' LEAP projects, after which we'll be engaging all 4 artists live in a Q&A. You are welcome and encouraged to submit questions and comments in the YouTube chat. The first artist we'll be hearing from is Jocelyn Jackson. Jocelyn Jackson is the co-founder of the People's Kitchen Collective, PKC, working at the intersection of art and activism and a food-centered political education project based in Oakland, California. She further explores these intersections as the founder of Just Us Kitchen, with liberation and love with every meal. Jocelyn Jackson will be presenting her LEAP-supported project, the Fixed Price Menu Guided Tour.
My name is Jocelyn Jackson. I am the founder of Justice Kitchen and the co-founder of People's Kitchen Collective. Recently, I was asked by LEAP, the Project for Law Enforcement Accountability, to do a project that really represents what it is to imagine a reality where Philando Castile and Geronimo Yanez are sitting at a table and perhaps conceive what could have been different about the outcome of July 6, 2016, when Geronimo Yanez shot and killed Philando Castile How could this experience between the two of them, between life and death, have been different? And that is my tablescape and conceptual menu called Fixed Price Menu. On the one hand, we have Philando's side of the table that is really filled with the colors and patterns and possibilities of his life that was taken so quickly and so soon. You'll see a centerpiece that is filled with the vibrancy of fresh flowers in a butternut squash vase. It's trailing onto the tabletop. This is very much this indication of the vitality of life that would have been possible if Officer Yanez had made a different choice. Also on his side of the table, Philando has a recipe box. It's called Mr. Phil's Recipes. And in that box are all the recipes that are presented on the table. And the menu that I created for this moment between these two people is actually something that was only served to Officer Yanez because it was clear that his life would continue and Philando's would not. Philando's plate is empty. It is very much representing this choice that could have been different. Instead of death, we could have had life. We could have had all of these dishes that represent all the really beautiful ways that his mother cared for him, with collard greens and with steak and with cornbread. I also wanted to have this menu really reflect the opportunity to explore what it is for these two lives to have been in such close proximity. What was it like? What would it have been if they had actually seen one another during one of those times? They could have had the same high school games that they attended. They could have gone to the same movie theater. One of the dishes is really looking at what would have been different if they'd shared part of their lives as opposed to creating this dynamic of us and them. And it's important as I look at the side of the table for Geronimo, that what I see is a tablecloth that isn't the vibrant colors and patterns, but is in fact an applique. And the applique on Geronimo Yanez's side is made from police uniforms, navy and navy blue shirts that are really presenting to us this idea of the blue line, this powerful, really distinct tradition that people will never, ever testify against one another within this fraternal order. This is one of the things that keeps this absolute repetition happening in our system, where officers are so often exonerated for these crimes, for these killings. And it was important for me to really express that clearly, that the blue line is definitely in effect and is so clearly a part of why we're not moving forward with the healing of racism that is part of our society and part of our systems. What's also present is a centerpiece, and the centerpiece is made from shards of broken tail light. And you'll remember that I mentioned that these paths of lives likely did cross before. And that is true. 5 years before this killing, they did cross when Philando Castile was yet again stopped for a broken tail light and was taken in and interacted with Philando Castile when he was taken into the police precinct. So it really does beg the question, what is possible when people actually do look up and look into the eyes of the person that they're interacting with? That's very present in the fact that this is a menu that includes a dessert that I made specifically for Geronimo Yanez's child. He'd just become a father a year before this killing. I wondered in this menu, what could have shifted, what changed in his life, where his idea of protecting and serving, again, for a young one, a child, could have influenced his reaction in this experience of finding, a 4-year-old child in the back seat that witnessed this murder. What if Geronimo Yanez's child had been one of the students that went to school at Philando Castile's school and was taken care of by Philando? And so I made this roasted sweet red beet red velvet cupcake specifically for that child, to imagine what would have been possible if their lives had crossed in ways that were really identifying and acknowledging each other's humanity. And it really feels important to call out this presence of the plates that are on the side of Geronimo Yanes's side of the table. These dishes on his side of the table are silver for a reason. They really are an indicator of that silver badge. And it also is that reflective surface so that people can really see an opportunity for self-reflection and in this process of interacting with one another. We can get nowhere when it comes to healing these systems if we aren't able to see ourselves as responsible and accountable to them. But I didn't want to stop with Geronimo Yanez. I wanted to really give an opportunity to point out all the people that are complicit in this crime. Over and over again, there's complicity beyond just the officer. And so I did put a stack of 16 additional silver plates beside Geronimo Yanez's plate. And each one has a name of someone that was responsible or accountable to this happening. That includes Tom Kelly, who is presently the defense attorney in the case against Chauvin. And this is something that is characteristic of our system, where defense attorneys are holding the line of racism as opposed to holding a line of protecting and serving. How do we really get clear on everyone that is involved in perpetuating these crimes that happen over and over and over again? This menu and this tablescape were created in a setting that was very ephemeral. It was something that happened in an afternoon. It was set up, these two chairs facing one another, one chair covered in a chef's jacket of Philando Castile, the other chair that's covered in the duty jacket of Geronimo Yanez. These two individuals that were made manifest at this table and facing one another. But what was the thing in this split in half, this bisected table that actually crossed over? The things that crossed over were the bullets. And those bullets, those 7 bullets that were shot into Philando Castile and killed him, those are the things that pushed through across that both centerpieces into the area of lack and of death that Philando Castile experienced. And the fact that there's really a momentum, a propulsion from one side of the table to the other because of those bullets and their presence there. And so I really want that to be a part of how we each see this experience of these two people sitting at the table. There is a different choice that can be made. There is a different outcome that could have happened if we're able to finally and completely and solidly see each other as the human beings that are at risk if we don't have deep care for one another. We don't get past these moments of completely depraved murder until we're able to hold these stories and share these stories with our families, with our communities, so that we can all be in that way of accountability for everyone that is complicit in these crimes. And I'm so grateful that we get to express ourselves through these mediums and show how we can be a collective that is holding accountability for everyone involved.
W.J. Lofton is a poet, writer, editor, director, and songwriter centering his work on the intersections of Black queer identity. His poetry and essays have been featured in several print and online literary journals, including Scalawag Magazine and Obsidian, Literature and Arts in the African Diaspora. Lofton is the author of the poetry book, A Garden for Black Boys Between the Stages of Soil and Stardust. He's Chicago-born but Alabama-raised, and he calls Atlanta, Georgia home. W.J. Lofton will be reading his Leap featured poem, Would You Kill God Too?
Some women will not arrive in the springtime to lay in the bluegrass of Kentucky. One will die in the arms of her lover inside the hallway of their home, and he will look desperately for mercy to show up unannounced, as the bullets did just minutes before. The hail-hot metal shot into the walls of scalp until it coughed gypsum. In 400 years, you never have knocked before entering, never entered without leaving a breath undone or a body taken, bending breath and begging for a better way to die. We bury our babies as you polish your badges, break batons over our beloved's backs. Officers, Cosgrove, Mattingly, Hankinson, how many nights have you hid the stench of homicide, tucked it in the farthest pockets of your dreams? How do you explain this to your children? Did you tell them the blood on your shoes belonged to a Black girl? Or is she not worth mentioning? Did you make a mirror out of her blood? Did you stand in it? God was in the room when you made a massacre out of someone's child. How long does a man daydream about murder before his index finger finds the small metal body of a gun? Did the clouds resemble smoke on March 13th? What does the sky before a murder look like? Officers, did you see the sunset? Was God standing at the horizon? Did you want to reach out and kill her too? Would you kill God too? Was heaven too far away, or your lashes too short? Some women would not arrive in the springtime to lay in the bluegrass of Kentucky. Some will survive to swing the steel of a switchblade, to warn your necks. No dying happens tonight. No prisoners will be taken. What You Kill God To is a visual poem that interrogates the interior life of two families. One side is the law enforcement, the other side is the victims of police sanctioned state violence. And so throughout the piece, I just ask several questions. And the most important question I ask is a moral obligation: would you kill God too? And it also, the most important part of this piece and the mission of LEAP, the Law Enforcement Accountability Project, is to name the officers. So I confront the officers as they confronted Breonna Taylor. And so I named them Officers Mattingly, Hankinson, and Cosgrove. So thank you for viewing What You Kill God To. Look into the poem and also look into LEAP's mission. Thank you.
Stephen John Irby is a Brooklyn-born street photographer and co-owner, co-founder, and director of Street Dreams magazine, a biannual print publication and full-service photography, publishing, consulting, creative, and experiences agency designed to connect with a savvy and progressive new media audience. Raised in Queens, the majority of Irby's work is derived from an endless source of inspiration from his home city as well as from traveling. Shooting primarily in black and white, Irby takes poignant portraits and gritty cityscapes from unique perspectives. He is currently an ambassador for Sony cameras. We will be viewing his photo essay, 41 to 99, supported by LEAP.
Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Stephen John Irby, aka Steve Sweatpants. One of the first LEAP artists, actually, to work on this incredible project about police accountability. I'm born and raised from New York, born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens, and I've been a photographer for the past 8 years. This project to me is it was something that's been really special and a very very emotional project to talk about. To visually communicate as well too, because how serious it was being in my life, being born and raised from New York. The story of Amadou Diallo's death is something that is always going to be relevant in my life. And being able to visually communicate how we can have some level of progress towards this conversation is very important to me. So I've been honored to work with Ava and the Leap Foundation on this, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about it as well too. One of the reasons why I named it 41 to 99 is at the time where Amadou Diallo was murdered, he was shot at 41 times, and it happened in 1999. So I kind of feel like those two numbers are very important to really kind of hold the weight of the story, and every time that we have these situations of speaking about police brutality, they always kind of show the victim as as always as a criminal still. So I kind of thought it would be really important to go on the block where Amadou Diallo used to live with his family. It shed light to this the mural that they have that's still there to this day. It's one of these kind of weird moments that I love to kind of shed light in the moment of, instead of putting like just the candlelight vigil in front of the mural at first, I would love to just kind of show what the mural represents. Yeah, so these are one of the photos that's usually one of the more mundane photos and less dynamic photos that I'm typically known for taking. But this photo is very significant and very sentimental to me. And the main reason why is because this is where, Miss Diallo and Amadou Diallo lived, and this is where he was shot at 41 times specifically. So no more than 3 steps away from that mural. This is this doesn't look any different from any other house that you would see in the neighborhood, especially if you're from New York or pretty much anywhere, honestly. But this regular house and this regular household got transformed on that day forever. And I feel like it's really significant and really important that to document things like this, just to kind of show that, as simple and mundane as this is, this is where he lost his life. Usually every time someone dies, and specifically like in New York areas or like just kind of city areas in general, they will have candlelight vigils for the people that passed away. There's a lot of cases where you will see candlelight vigils kind of sprouted throughout the community over a span of time that it ends up being like these mausoleums and kind of like these museum pieces of the people that used to hold down the area. And it was really important. But I never seen that effect in the places where the police actually lived, like when they lived deep in Long Island and deep in upstate New York, that usually in places that are not connected with the actual neighborhoods that they're policing. So I thought it was really important to bring the candlelight vigil ceremony into the neighborhoods where the police officers live. So this photo is particularly taken in Babylon, where one of the officers lived. And I set this up right around the Long Island Railroad entrance. And I thought it was really interesting to have like this kind of house and the white picket fence kind of composed in the background. But at the same time, you have the candlelight vigil still in front of it. And I made sure to write on the candles certain kind of monikers that were happening around the same time. So, one of the candles on the front says "First to Shoot," and the other one says "Killer." I wanted to just kind of blatantly put out that the officer that lived in this area in Long Island was the first to shoot. One of the officers that murdered Amadou Diallo lives in College Point, this area in Queens. And coming to find out, College Point is the place where the police academy actually is. Who literally lives where the police academy is, still isn't properly trained. I wanted to bring the candlelight vigil ceremony to literally in front of the police academy. To kind of really reflect that these are the amount of times that this particular officer shot at Amadou Diallo. So that's why there's 4 candles out for this moment. There was something that was very interesting in the in one of the quotes from one of the police officers, and he said that after he murdered Amadou Diallo, that he had these restless nights of sleeping, and then he slept with one eye open. So I kind of wanted to. I'm usually not the kind of person to set up situations, but I felt for this kind of moment to tell the photo essay, it was really impactful and important to visually kind of communicate, what it feels like for an officer to be restless at night and sleeping with his gun next to him. This is one of my visual representations of what it feels like for a police officer to kill an innocent Black person or just an innocent civilian in general, and what the repercussions of that feels like. on the first day that I attempted to document this whole in the Bronx, and it was very difficult to actually even pull this off because while you're conceptualizing all of these ideas, especially in the pandemic, you kind of forget sometimes that you're in a pandemic. My original idea was to bring out 41 people, and I wanted 41 people to stand in solidarity for the times that Amadou Diallo was shot at. But during COVID and like just kind of understanding that this is absolutely insane to ask of anyone to kind of meet in person at this time. We pretty much have like 7 Bronx natives that all remember this story firsthand about what happened to Amadou Diallo, and nothing that was forced and everything that we felt. And, there's still the unjust and unease that we felt at the same time of dealing with this tragedy 20 something years later. So, this photo is really special to me. And it was one of those photos that I felt was the dynamic moment of, even though people have seen fists up in the air a bunch of times, but this one feels a little bit different when we're doing it in front of the mural for Amadou Diallo. So, these conversations are ever evolving, and I'm just so appreciative and very grateful to, be chosen to tell this story, because this has definitely been one of the hardest stories that I've ever had to tell, and not because of the difficulty of taking the photos, but of the subject matter. This has nothing to do about everything that I've done in my life, but this has everything to do about telling the story the right way. And I know that this has just been an incredible opportunity to share this story and have it evolve over time to be something that leads towards a more progressive conversation, because this has to stop. And hopefully doing things like this and within art and culture leads to deeper conversations that hold more weight.
Now, I'm extremely humbled to speak to our 3 inaugural LEAP grantees artists live. Jocelyn, WJ, and Steve, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like each of you to introduce yourself to everyone watching and tell us a bit about the background of your project, including the name of the police officer and of the victim, the fallen person. We'll start with Jocelyn, and then we'll move to WJ, and then to Stephen.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and thank you to everyone for hosting this symposium that is crucial. My name is Jocelyn Jackson. I am the artist that was selected to represent the experience between Philando Castile and Geronimo Yanez in Minneapolis on July 6, 2016.
Hi, family. I am WJ Lofton. I'm the poet that was commissioned for the work of Would You Kill God 2, focusing on the murder of Breonna Taylor by officers Mattingly, Cosgrove, and Hankinson.
Hey, what's up, everyone? And thank you, Anthony. You're doing an incredible job right now. My name is Stephen John Irby, aka Steve Sweatpants. I was the first sleep artist that was selected. And the project that I was working on was specifically dealing with Amadou Diallo and him being murdered by the 4 police officers, Sean Carroll, Edward McMullen, Sean Carroll, Kenneth Boss, and Richard Murphy.
And as we enter this conversation, I would also like to introduce our surprise 4th guest that you see on the screen. Ra Ray is a singer, songwriter, producer, and visual artist from New York City. Her professional credits include touring worldwide and working as a supporting vocalist for such noteworthy artists as Jill Scott, Erykah Badu, Lala Hathaway, Jennifer Lopez, Natalie Cole, Sean Combs, Chrisette Michele, Rasan Patterson, and Patti LaBelle, among others. And now I'm glad to speak to all 4 of our artists.
Thank you, Anthony. As Anthony mentioned, I am a singer and a songwriter. My name is Ava Valverde. And the case that was put before me is the fallen is Mr. Kenneth Chamberlain Sr., and the officer who took his life is Anthony Corelli. I've written an original song entitled Safe Where for this case. And the song serves as both a series of questions and a core statement. Where are we as Black and Brown people in this world safe to be treated and protected as human beings. So here's a short snippet of Safe Wear.
All right. I'm so excited to be speaking with all of you about your process and about what your art truly meant to this movement against police violence. So let's first talk about the process that actually involved your project. So all of your art and the products of your crafts, each of your individual crafts, inspire and empower. For our community, empowerment is necessary to pursue tangible change. What does empowerment mean to each of you in context of the struggle against police brutality? And we can start with Jocelyn.
Anthony, thank you for that question about empowerment in our community. I want to start answering that question by saying a little bit about my background, which is that I am trained as an artist, as an attorney, as an environmental educator. And the through line that I found in order to be expressive in all of those disciplines was cooking, using cooking as a modality for community organization and for healing. And so that was my moment of empowerment, of finding all the ways that there's a need for being dynamic. We can't be single discipline approaches to these issues. We have to bring all the talents. We have to bring all of the knowledge and wisdom. We have to bring our ancestors and spirit with us in this process. Because without those things, this is going to be the heartbreaking experience of repetition over and over.
Right. And for WJ, for you as a poet, you also explore intersectionality within your poetry, and empowerment is critical with working with multiple communities and identities. So how does empowerment also work for your art, especially against police brutality?
So because I understand the power of words, I understand that we are each other's harvest. And so I know that the language that I use will either speak life or take life. And so we have to start using a vocabulary that allows us to see a more imaginative future, right? A future that does not include state-sanctioned violence, a future where we can, actually dwell together without this violence having such a heavy presence. So yeah, so empowerment is just, seeing myself in you, right? And knowing that we are sharing this human condition, but we have to be honest with the language we use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Steve, especially because you take almost like slice of life photos of the urban areas where these murders often happen, and often like in the homes where both the victims and the police officers had been. And so how does empowerment like function in your art?
I mean, I think that's just to piggyback off of everyone, is a really great question. And I think empowerment is just such a very vast and kind of multidimensional way that you look at it. I think for me, empowerment is one of the subliminal themes in my work since I've been taking photos in the first place for the past 8 years, especially when it comes towards empowerment towards Black people in our lives, and especially everything that's been transpiring with the case that I had to work on. One of the biggest things is to make sure that using the images to empower us to push us past these kind of social constructs that people always kind of seem that people feel that we're familiar with. There's nothing normal about anything that's been happening. So if we can use the images to empower, whether it's a thought to see like a candlelight vigil being in a place where it's not supposed to be, where the officers are actually living at, or whether it's to see even through 21 years later that we're still, in remembrance of Amadou Diallo's by standing in front of his mural and representation for him, that goes a long way. And that little slice of life can just, and just by taking an image, it can really change a lot. So I think it's very important to understand the context of the images that we're taking and understanding what the kind of images that are being portrayed, with our lives.
Right. Context is imperative to all of our projects and how we express this type of art. And Rare, we're going to hear your song in just a bit. And you are the fourth upcoming LEAP artist grantee. We're so excited to have you. And even before we listen to your song, how were you empowered to both write this music and then tell the story of the person that you were remembering through your art?
Well, I have to be really honest. I say the level of empowerment came directly from me first, to take myself to task with what I do with this information. I feel like we've seen so much imagery and trauma, and there was a level of rebellion for me. I don't know about for the other artists, but it's like, why do I need to say the obvious? Why do I need to say that our lives matter? So for me, the first step of empowerment is just kind of taking myself to task. What do I do with these words? What do I say on behalf of the fallen? And as Nina Simone says, artists are always on the front line in terms of speaking for our community, in terms of trauma and the fight. So the level of empowerment for me is just, again, taking myself to task to know that I do have to say something. I do have to put words to these feelings, and sitting with myself and really figuring out how I do that on behalf of myself, on behalf of the fallen, and on behalf of my people.
Exactly. And just to take what you, one thing that you said, that artists are always on the front line. And for all of you, you are on the front line telling the stories of these fallen persons and the police officers that perpetrated their murders. And I think that's so important for us as a community to process. And so for each of you, how do you see the stories you tell change the way folks perceive the severity of the issue? Because this is an issue that has, like Stephen said, has been going on for years, and it's much overdue, and we need tangible change. So Jocelyn, can we start with you again? How do you see the stories you tell change the way folks perceive the issue?
Thank you, Anthony. You are wise beyond your years. I'm so grateful you're here. It is so important what you ask, because I'll start by saying each of us were given a great deal of research. We did a great deal of research. We internalized these stories. We slept in the reality of them. We breathed in the truth of them. From podcasts to court recordings to interviews. So there's just all this information that we took in order to express artistically and create an aesthetic response to heartbreak, to murder, to these killings that are a ongoing story of our people. And so in light of that, I really feel like it's important for artists to be in this particular conversation that shifts to action, because we have a specific way of being able to interpret, translate, to portray a story and an experience in a way that some people are able to receive more readily than a news story, than a secondhand account, or figuring out how to watch this video. A video for me that I watched only for the first time doing this project, because I could not take the trauma of seeing all these videos. And artists can propel us into these stories, tell us a truth, radically imagine a possibility, and perhaps in that create more change, more transformation, because otherwise we're stuck in a rut that is killing us.
And WJ, especially with working with multiple marginalized communities and expressing their stories in their art, how have you found that you've changed folks' perceptions about the multiple issues you're facing in your art?
First and foremost, I approach my art to make sure that Black people specifically feel loved. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to not so much capitalize on the trauma, but to say we have these beautiful moments in our lives. But then I wanted to hold up a mirror, and we talk about the love of God. We talk about, loving our neighbor. And so I began to think about, well, what's less godly than someone barging into someone's house who was previously asleep in the arms of their lover? Would you kill God too, right? If you could have the audacity to take someone's life, who was just previously enjoying humanness. And then it's very important for the audience to reflect on that question, right? It's a question of moral obligation. And so the most important thing for me was to extend a flower, but also hold up a mirror, to say, I love you enough to make you see the truth. And so hopefully when people view my work, they are confronted with difficult questions.
Right. And it's those type of difficult questions that give us that valuable perspective that propels us to change, just borrowing what Jocelyn was saying. And Stephen, you're working with a medium that evokes these powerful images, of just working with black and white. And so that visually creates this stark contrast that forces you to look at this art, but also look at the stories behind it. And so how have you found that people have perceived these stories, and how has that changed the way they approach this issue?
I mean, everyone's been bringing up all these great points, and it kind of has this weird synergy that kind of relates into, photography as well too. Is, being able to be an access point of information is very important, especially when you're well informed and then, like Jocelyn said, like you literally slept with these stories. I can't really reiterate how hard it is to not just visually communicate this, but also it's a very painful experience. I mean, even speaking about it now, like you still feel his pain. Like his mother is still alive. She still doesn't have her son. And then and being able to rehash this kind of story is really painful for her as well too. So it's just being very conscious of the storytelling aspect is one of the reasons why I think it's just really important to be the right kind of access point for these situations. That if you're well informed, especially in this situation, I think through photography, through food, through writing, through music, through pretty much any kind of medium that's not killing us, is going to be the most beneficial way for us to actually be able to, progress and learn, and then also have other people learn. This is our pain. The Black trauma is not always about the Black trauma, but it's also just like our experiences and what the solution is going to be on top of that as well too. And I think all of these mediums is very important for that.
Right. Remembrance is key in order to both heal and to evoke real change. And Ferrari, you tell your story through music and through song. And I'm also curious to hear, how do you see the way you sing or the words that you're singing, the stories that you're telling through your song, affect how people see this issue?
I think that, again, doing this project with Leap just taught me a lot about how I would approach songwriting, specific to this case. And I think that one of the most challenging but rewarding things that I've experienced in working on this song is pivoting the conversation from just talking about the fallen to directly calling out the officer that took his life. And I kind of approached this song, I approached this song as if I was sitting in front of, in this case, Officer Anthony Corelli, and was able to ask him, why, and this is the level of violation that we experience when you come into our homes and kill us. And I wanted to take him to task as if I was having a conversation with him, as if he was sitting across from me. So just really concentrating on the truth, finding those words that speak to that truth was really important to me in writing this song.
Yeah, and being able to picture that conversation with that officer reminds me a lot of how Jocelyn was able to capture that with Yolanda Castile and Officer Ramirez across the table for art. And indeed, art mimics life and life mimics art. It's a bit cliche, but I think it really applies here because these are painful, real experiences of people that were known, that were loved, that were sons and daughters and uncles and aunts and fathers and mothers. And as we consider all of that and the humanity behind these stories, I do want to be able to open it up to the whole audience involved in this conversation to understand a little bit more behind the inspiration and what moves you on at this project. This is one question we have from the chat. So did this project change your approach to art practice and social justice movements? And we'll start again with Jocelyn.
Really, this is a moment where we come to evaluate, and I'm going to speak for myself. I came to evaluate my place in this accountability, right? And take serious agency and responsibility. This is going to be a project that's 25 artists total. So we're going to have an entire cohort of artists with projects that are manifesting these brutal and violent exchanges in the streets of our country, right? So when I think about what my art practice is and what is the responsibility I take. Typically I'm doing projects that are centering the lived experience of Black and brown folks, where we are sitting very steadily in this place of acknowledging joy and sorrow. I'm doing work that's specifically acknowledging the healing experiences of Black women and femmes, because that is the community for me that I connect with, and also that is the most at risk in my experiences of social justice movement. So my art practice, along with all the other disciplines that I have some access to, is leveraged in that direction perpetually. There's no rest in this work of creation on the behalf of liberation. And that is something I want to call on everyone listening today to take on. I have this thing that I can offer, which is this menu. You can go and find all these recipes. As my example, go cook those recipes. Read the narrative and the story that goes along with each dish. Really take that in, and then live your life on purpose for the liberation, specifically of Black and brown folks that are being killed on an everyday basis by police violence. I'm an abolitionist. Prison actually isn't good enough for me. I need repair and I need transformation. I need this system that is broken to go away. So please, everyone, take that responsibility.
WJ? Yeah. For WJ, how did this project change your approach for your art practice and social justice?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Anthony. And, thank you so much, Jocelyn. It really made me think about, what I really think about as far as liberation, right? And do I have enough integrity in my art to actually vocalize that? And within my poem, I never called for the arrest, because I know fundamentally that's not enough, and so I would like for us to be a little bit more imaginative, to see how do we attack the system? How do we say the system is the problem and burn it to the ground, right? And I do mean these things cannot happen, right? Abolition is reimagination. It makes us ask the hard questions. And so I'm very grateful for this opportunity to give this offering of love, but also to pose the question, where do we go from here? And thank you, Jocelyn, because oftentimes when I was working on this project, there was this sense of guilt I was dealing with, because I do believe Breonna Taylor's family deserves justice, right? Her family deserves justice. But I also know there's a greater truth to be told, and that until we hold the system accountable, it doesn't matter if one officer goes to jail. So I would like for us to employ what that means. Think a little bit deeper. Don't go so easily to the easy questions and the answers.
Right. Innovation in our approach. Yeah. And for Stephen, how did that change the way you approached your art and how you approach social justice as a whole?
So for me, since with my case with Amadou Diallo is a little bit of an older case, it was a really strong reflection of just from the past 21 years of still dealing with the same problem and it being enhanced in certain ways. So I feel like it's really important for me what I've kind of learned and everything throughout this is throughout my whole career I've always just been a Black photographer. I never really accepted it. My life kind of evolved into something where the more images that I were taking kept on, it really started to define my life. And then everything, especially from the last 3 years of just documenting Black life and trying to show Black stories of us being normal. I have a photo of a subway dancer, and then people used to make fun of subway dancers because they was making fun of their hustle. But then that's something that's ours, And even with something like this, I just take our Black stories so much more seriously, and I just understanding the context of how we want to actually communicate it. And then I feel like the visual representation of it, and also the culture of it, it just needs to really change, because a lot of these conversations just go under the dust now. Like, once one story happens, everybody forgets it once with the next week. But like with the art that we're creating and everything that we're doing now, it leads into these deeper kind of conversations that leads into, it just not just being swept under the rug. So I just feel it's really important that projects like this and like what I'm doing personally, it just helps keep the conversation alive. It doesn't turn into like, well, another Black dude got shot again. Like I never wanted to feel like that, and sometimes with the media, it kind of feels like that. And I feel like this work is really strong, and it does. And none of these conversations are like, oh well, like it's just another clickbait. Now this is something that's real, that's substantial, and I feel strongly about that.
Right, that's just true. And Rare, and we want to hear your perspective and how that evolved along with your approach with art practice. And if you can also tell us like what you're going to be working on next, so we can see the progression of this progress and your various other projects, and we can see how you're continuing to propagate this mission of liberation and abolition, and honestly revolution. So, want to hear what you're working on next and how this approach changed for you.
Sure. I'd just like to echo everything that everyone else said so eloquently. For me, activism as of late has become about community, and specifically with sitting with the other artists. What are the conversations that we are having to heal ourselves first, and then to put information out into the world that would help people to heal and to pivot the conversations that we have been having. I also take a really strong responsibility in terms of how we use our resources, specifically social media. What are we sharing? What are we putting out there? What is the message? What are the visuals that we are continuing to see? How are we responsible as artists for putting those images out there? What does it mean? How do we take those images in? What is the recourse behind some of those images? So for me, activism for me right now is really about just developing a community of artists that can support each other and really concentrate on the messages that we're putting out there and having a continuous conversation around these messages and calling out these systems specifically. It's so easy to talk about the victims because we relate to that. And in writing this song, I have to really quickly say that, I took it so personally because as Black and brown people, we go out into the world and we're prepared for what we're going to deal with on a daily basis. And I like to believe that everyone's home is a safe space. I think as artists, we curate our homes to be safe spaces where we express ourselves and refresh and renew. And I took this case so personally because I just cannot imagine the level, again, of violation in my home. So I really just want to continue to have a group of people around me that can hold me up so that I can hold other people up as an artist. And as for what I'm working on next, I am a visual artist too, so I'm working on a photography project. And just continuing to write. Really, it's just really about, this past year for me has just been about quiet and therapy and just figuring out what I want to say next, honestly.
Yes, self-care is so important as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And before we hear your song, we do also want to hear from each of the other artists what you're all working on next. So if we actually can go in reverse order. Briefly from Stephen, then to WJ, then from Jocelyn.
Okay, Anthony, you killed this, dude. You did a great job.
You did.
Good job. I love the microphone too. Just have to say that. So the next project that I'm working on is actually I'm curating a gallery with the South Street Seaport. They hit me up to curate a gallery for the next 3 months, and I'm theming the show Celebrating the Winds. So I'm curating a show with 24 different photographers, and it's been a rough past couple of years. So with this show, is to bringing everybody out with, hopefully they're vaccinated, getting my vaccination soon. We can just celebrate the wins together and just celebrate the highs and the lows, and everything that kind of encompasses life in New York City. So if anybody's in New York from May to July, come hang out with me at the Seaport.
Amazing. For WJ?
So I'm always pondering the question how we get free. And so a large part of that question is, the answer is joy for me. And so I'm working on a memoir and also a collection of poetry. And it's always extending out to my people, my family, my community, that's saying that like we are here, and here as in the past, the present, and the future. I have this tattoo in Sankofa that says "Go back and fetch it." So I'm always going back and bringing what our ancestors left here to the present. So yeah, just follow me on Instagram for more. And I'll be sending you all my love and joy. Thank you, Anthony.
Likewise.
Thank you. And for Jocelyn, I'd love to hear what you're cooking up next.
I'm so grateful for each of you, and it's really powerful to hear your words and what you are in the world. It makes me feel more alive to be in these conversations, and so grateful that with People's Kitchen Collective, with Justice Kitchen, I do one-on-one experiences that are totally customized with Black women and femmes, and it's a beautiful healing experience. And that's where that idea of creating liberation and love with every meal comes from. With People's Kitchen Collective, we're often feeding 500, 1,000 people at a time. And of course, that changed in the last year. But we're looking forward to the time where we can be more creative about gathering folks back together. And luckily, with so much hard work, we were granted the Rainin Fellowship just recently, as well as the Creative Capital Award, which is just phenomenal. And it feels so supportive and resourced. And we'll be doing a project called Earthseed based on the source material of Octavia Butler's Parable series, as well as the Black Panther Party's survival programs, and really looking at collective care and looking at surviving in a way that is filled with joy, purpose, possibility, and really a reimagined world that we can build together.
Anthony, I just want to say to everyone, just thank you for being so present enough to not only be a voice for this project, but all of your work. It's really, really inspiring to, one, be a part of this, and to just see how each one of us are present and hear our voices.
Indeed. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much to each of you. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you, WJ. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Rare. So much for spending this time with us, conversating with us, and giving us your perspectives on justice and liberation and abolition, and for doing the work that you're doing, because it's so important. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
I want to hear this song.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for everyone for joining us for this finale to the Police Violence Symposium. Again, thank you to our artists for sharing your powerful pieces and your stories. Thank you for our conveners and co-sponsors for making this symposium possible. To LEAP for supporting our imperative work of the artists and the struggle for justice. And to you for joining us and hearing these stories and perspectives. And now we finally have the extremely special and exclusive pleasure of hearing a special preview of Valverde's brand new original song, Safe Where.
While I lay there left to die, you're concerned for yourself and your consequences, knowing your badge gives you claim to blame fear as a reason you get away. The hating you fed by a system keeping you safe. In your mind, my skin gives you cause to take aim. And I'm afraid when you shoot to kill. Now the space where I lay is the very same home you turned into my grave. I'm the one should be afraid. Safe where, when for you fear is justified. Safe safe word. Enough for you to take my life. Blood on your hand, the color of blue and red. Give me more time, in my defense, wearing my
Greetings, everyone. My name is Angela Brizant, and I am Assistant Director of Pluralism and Leadership in the Opal Office. I would like to take this time to thank you for attending the Police Violence, Global and Local Perspectives virtual symposium. This week-long international conference, comprised of 54 artists, activists, alumni, students, and scholars, drew its inspiration from the United Nations resolution. And this resolution calls for the promotion and protection of the human rights and fundamental freedoms of Africans and of people of African descent against excessive use of force and other human rights violations by law enforcement officers. The multifaceted symposium you attended this week explored this complex, difficult, and urgent issue through a series of discussions, art exhibits, and films. The topics we covered this week range from Rodney King, 30 years later, to police violence in Nigeria, Uganda, Brazil, and France. We also looked at the Capitol insurrection, and we heard the perspectives of current Dartmouth students and recent alum. This was an amazing campus-wide Dartmouth collective effort to bring everything together. We want to extend our highest gratitude to our panelists, conveners, colleagues at the HOP, as well as conferences and events, and our colleagues working behind the scenes, particularly Lisa Meehan and AAAS. We'd also like to thank our sponsors. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you for bringing your energy, and thank you for spending your time. We appreciate you.